Good evening. You're on the smoking section with Stephen Helfer. That's me, and I'm very happy to have a fellow member of Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights, David Ajemian. David, thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you, Steve. I've been wanting to do this for some time.
Well, that's great, and it's always good to have a interlocutor on the show with me. You know, I kind of cough a little bit because I'm getting over a cold. But when you're doing a smokers' rights program, it's very important not to cough, right?
I know you don't want to give out the wrong signal.
Don't want to
Yes.
send out the wrong image, right?
Right.
Now, Dave, do you mind if I call you Dave, or do you prefer David?
David's good.
Okay,
Yes.
David's good. I'm going to right now, by the way, put on our phone number. I hope someone will give us a call, but que sera, sera. When we first reconnected, which was about, would you say 4 years ago?
Right. Yeah. I bumped into you at the FedEx store on Mount Auburn Street.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. And I hadn't seen you for probably, 10 years maybe?
15. Yeah.
That long?
Yes. I'd only met you, I think, just a couple of times. We had lunch back in the mid-'90s.
With Jeff Cairns.
Right. Yes. We were both working in the Harvard Library System.
You, I, and Jeff.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, all three of us.
Yes. And I remember thinking that you were quite an interesting person.
Oh,
at
you're
that
very
time.
kind. You're very kind. Thank you. Thank you. It was that was the time we met at Lehman Hall, right?
Yes. We had at Dudley House. Yes.
And we ate in that little small dining room there
Right.
in the back.
Right. Good memory.
Yeah, I don't know why that stands out in my mind. And Jeff was giving you kind of a hard time, right?
I don't remember. I didn't know him that well, but
Were you weren't a student at that time, were you? Or were you?
I know I was working at the Lamont Library for Harvard. Yeah.
Oh, really? So after you graduated from Harvard College, you worked for a while in the library system there?
I did. Yes. And then I pursued the Catholic priesthood and entered the seminary a few years after that, and was an active priest for a number of years. And then I've been on a sabbatical for quite some time, living here in Cambridge.
How long were you a practicing priest?
Well, about 8 years.
8 years. Mm-hmm. So that's a good length of time. I always, I go to mass fairly often, and I always, watch the priests. It's they seem usually pretty calm up there, but everything is very choreographed. I mean, they want to get the mass done in a certain period of time, and there's a lot of things to coordinate. And I don't remember ever seeing a real flub, although I'm sure it's happened, and I'm sure that's something that priests talk about and joke about, right?
Yeah.
The time that so-and-so dropped the such and such,
Right, or the sound system went off, or the lights went out, or somebody fainted in the congregation. It could be any number of things, but the mass must go on.
Yes,
as we say.
The mass and the show and life and all of these things must go on. Are you familiar with that Samuel Beckett quotation? I can't go on, I'll go on.
I haven't heard that, but it sounds...
I like it.
Yes.
I picked it up from this book called When Breath Turns to Air, or When Air Turns to Breath, written by this doctor a young doctor who had his whole career in front of him, and then he gets diagnosed with life-ending cancer, terminal cancer, right? And he wrote this book that's a #1 bestseller, and it's a very good book. I like it. And one of the things he kept himself going was this phrase by Samuel Beckett: "I can't go on, I'll go on." And anyway,
Keep on keeping on.
yes, precisely. So now, the last time I ran into you, you weren't smoking, I don't think.
No, I think I bumped into you about 4 years ago, and I've as I've gotten to know you and gotten to be involved with our Cambridge Citizens group, I've actually picked up the habit and I'm enjoying it quite a lot.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
And for the last year or so, I've been smoking regularly.
And
Yes.
you know, so you've been contrary to that old. There used to be a commercial on television when I was a kid: smoking more but enjoying it less. Did you ever see that commercial?
No, I didn't know.
Well, that's because you didn't. You probably never saw a smoking commercial on television.
The one I remember was the one with the father and his little son, I think, and they were sitting under a tree or something, and they. Do you remember that one?
No, I don't.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, so you do remember television commercials?
And then, of course, you know,
with
Winston
cigarette.
tastes good like a cigarette should.
And that was on television.
I remember that.
Okay, so you are evidently old enough to come because as we all know, the tobacco companies. I believe it was a voluntary thing. I don't think they were forced. Or maybe they were pressured, but I think it was a voluntary thing. They stopped advertising on television and radio, or at least on television, around 1971.
Oh, really? That early?
That early, yes.
Well, I went to Paris for a summer in 1977 when I was in high school, and I picked up smoking these French brands like Gauloise and
Gitan,
which was very exciting. You know, unfiltered and.
Oh, you smoked the unfiltered Gauloise Bleu.
Yes, bleu, yes. And I came back home after the summer and I lit up a cigarette and my brother was so shocked. My whole family was shocked.
Is that right?
They thought, oh, you're just doing this to be cool, aren't you?
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Well, that's a good reason to do something, right?
Yeah, it is kind of...
Nothing wrong with being cool, right?
No, it's countercultural.
I mean, it's better than being lame, right? I think. Mm-hmm. Although I don't know, I guess I should say it's better than being handicapped, right? Or challenged.
Right. Well, you know, wasn't there a book called Medium Cool?
I think there was, but I don't remember it. But now you enjoy smoking. Now, this is kind of, to me, it's been a profound question. I mean, do you really know what you like about smoking? I mean, it's not easy to identify. It's not like when you eat a chocolate ice cream cone. I mean, that chocolate kind of bursts on your lips and it just, oh, it's so delicious. Or if you smoke pot, all of a sudden everything looks groovy and the colors are beautiful. I mean, nothing happens dramatic when you smoke.
Well, it's a very pleasurable sensation of drawing the smoke, into your mouth and the anticipation of looking forward to it. I know in the morning when I get up, I have a cigarette with my first cup of coffee, and it's just. It's really
it's a little bit of heaven on earth.
It enhances the experience, quite a bit. I mean, I've been drinking coffee my whole life, but now I need the cigarette as much as I need the coffee.
Right. Oh, it's a marriage made in heaven, I would say, right?
Yes, and also with maybe a cocktail in the afternoon at a happy hour, maybe a cigarette with a beer or a glass of wine.
So you find this a very sensory pleasure. You like drawing the smoke in. Do you find, for example, I know that I often get up and I'm kind of bummed out, depressed. And then once I have a pretty strong cup of coffee, not crazy, and not large, and a cigarette, and all of a sudden my attitude changes towards life. Do you find that like an attitudinal change once you have that coffee and cigarette?
Well, it definitely has an effect on your sense of well-being. I think that the cigarette, along with the coffee. I mean, it relaxes you, but I think it also has a stimulating effect as well.
Right, and it's like once you do that, you're ready to do a crossword puzzle, for example, or something that requires cogitation.
Right. Well, I think it puts you into a sort of a zone where you just feel more peaceful, and you just feel like the day is starting and things are good, and it's reliable too. That's what I like about smoking.
Oh, really?
It's like throughout the day you can sort of it's a little something that you can look forward to it.
It's not like people who we know we can't count on.
Right.
There's so few people we can count on. They let you down.
I know.
As often as they bring you up. But a cigarette doesn't do that.
Cigarette is a good friend.
In thick and thin, matters thick and thin, won't desert you, you know.
Although it's funny, I do sometimes feel that I try to space them out. I mean, there's a time to have a cigarette, I think, during the day. You don't just want to, I don't like to just push one in my mouth just out of nervousness or boredom. I like to wait, have one and then maybe you wait a few hours and you might have had a candy bar or a cup of coffee and then you enjoy it more rather than just, feeling compelled to.
Well, you're almost kind of a connoisseur then of cigarettes in a sense.
Not as much as you.
Well, I don't know if I'm a connoisseur. I mean, because, for example, I smoke a lot during the day. I don't, I don't make a big deal about the kind of tobacco I smoke.
But you roll your own.
I roll my own, yes, but and now I've become so accustomed to my rolled cigarettes that I'll anytime smoke a commercial cigarette, but I won't. I haven't bought one. Boy, I haven't bought a commercial cigarette in 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I don't think. Yeah, about.
It must be nice not to have to. You probably don't run out as frequently, right? When you got your own bag of tobacco. Sometimes I run out of my packet like at the early before I go to bed or something.
Inopportune moments.
Yes, and then the stores are closed, and it's like, oh, I'm not going to have that cigarette when I get up in the morning, But with your rolling your own, you get around.
Yeah, I don't get it. And plus I live with people who have tobacco. Mm-hmm. And so, if I run out, I often can, find their tobacco. And that's a reason. I can't think of a better reason to live with other people, right?
Well, it definitely brings
if they smoke, they have tobacco, so you run out.
Right, yeah, it's, it's a bonding. I love to go out with you guys from the group, and
when we go to the Somerville City Club.
Yes, it's yeah. And I really don't worry about. I don't worry about the health effects. I think.
Well, why is it that you don't worry about the health effects when we have a society that seems to worry about every little thing they put in their mouths, and the idea of smoking is like.
Well,
something...
you've actually had an influence on me in that regard because
Mm-hmm.
you've been very convincing to me about the fact that the studies on the health dangers of tobacco are possibly overrated and certainly not completely understood scientifically. Mm-hmm. So I think I can just be comfortable with the fact that I really don't anticipate major health problems. And you've certainly pointed out enough people who are very up in years, whether it's 100 years old or
70 years old.
Yeah.
Or 7 years old. For example, I have a friend, my friend Haig, whom I think you've met, right? Haig.
I think so.
Who is profoundly schizophrenic, and he has been smoking 2 packs a day for, I'm sure, well over 50 years. And like many schizophrenics, not only does he draw the smoke deeply into his lungs, but he smokes his cigarettes down to right to the filter. And he's 73 years old, and he's not in good physical condition, but he's not in that bad a physical condition. And for someone who has been taking very powerful antipsychotic drugs and doesn't have a particularly good diet, he's to reach the age of 73 is something. It's not like advanced age, but this idea that cigarettes are lethal is preposterous.
Yes.
Because there's just so many people who reach the ages of 70 and 80, which is not really advanced age these days, but it's enough to say that it certainly does not appear that cigarettes are lethal.
And I feel bad for smokers who are what do they say, self-loathing smokers. They're hooked, but they are always just saying, oh, I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
And I got to get off this. It's like, give me a break.
Right.
But I think smoking has opened up a fault line in our society and in our world about how do people look at mortality and how do they look at the brief time that we have alive on this planet, and I think people who want to control smoking and eliminate it are coming from an attitude of like, we have to have control over our fates and over our bodies and over our health, to an extreme degree. It's equivalent to people who I think who are obsessed about going to the gym, or obsessed about organic foods, or it's two different ways of looking at the world.
Well, I
I
mean,
think.
whether you live to be 17 or 100, in the grand scheme of things, it's still a very short life.
Certainly, yes. I mean,
You're here for a moment or two, and then between that, you've got the infinite before you and the infinite after you. So your time on Earth is very. I mean, do you think? I think this is not something new, but like we live in what you might call hyper-secular times, I think. And do you think this smoking thing is related to that idea that that everything is in this lifetime and there's nothing after or before it, and therefore we have to squeeze out every drop, every moment that we can live?
Yes, and that we're doing and that we're somehow building credit for ourselves in some way by doing everything in a healthy way or something. That it's we're putting money in the bank or something.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That's how I see it. Or it's but
I think there's some people. I think this idea that there's two lists of things: the things that are good for you and the things that are bad for you. And everything can be divided into good for your health and bad for your health. And the more things you do that are good for your health, the better person you are morally.
Right. Yes.
And you're going to avoid every disease. And the worst things you do are, not only are you going to get sick maybe, but you're also kind of a bad person.
It's a moral judgment.
Yeah, right.
Certainly.
Health has become like a moral imperative. The striving for, immortality, perhaps.
And I think that it's very obvious that it's an ideological point of view that the anti-smoking people have, because they want to drive it out from areas where it really doesn't affect people's health. Whether it's on a sidewalk or in a park or even in your own home.
Right.
I mean, their position is that we will do what's best for you. We know what's best for you. And even though tobacco is a perfectly legal substance, it's been very prized, for centuries. Equivalent to wine or alcohol, I think, in moderation. They've made it out to be a poison, which is clearly an ideological way of looking at it.
Right, and according to Paracelsus, who is the father of toxicology, there's nothing that is not a poison and nothing that is a poison, but it all depends on the dose. So, for example, you and I both know that no one, to our knowledge, has ever, in the history of tobacco smoking that I know of, overdosed from tobacco. But we know people who've overdosed from water.
Right.
Drinking too much water and putting their electrolytes or whatever it is into disarray.
Well, I was going to mention that. You mentioned water. I mean, that's a perfect example. I mean, so many people I know, especially my family, they buy bottled water. They tell me, you're not drinking enough water. You
Yes.
got to have 8 glasses of water a day. Which, even my doctor says that's bogus. I mean,
really?
So it's like these ideas about how to stay healthy are not even. They just kind of gotten out there, almost
without any kind of scientific
it's like innuendo,
basis.
Really. Yeah. I mean, and then also, findings are changed. About one year they'll say that bacon or fat is dangerous for you, and then they'll say it's not that bad, or butter. I think they were condemning butter. I think. Did
you read that article in the New York Times by Gina Colada about Dr. Ioannidis?
Was that on our Facebook?
No,
page?
it wasn't on our Facebook page, because it really didn't have a lot to do with smoking, but it was basically talking about this. I should send you and Emily that article, because it's very, very good. And Gina Colada is, I always think pina colada, but anyway. Maybe it's not even colada. Maybe it's colada. No, I can't. She's a New York Times science writer, and she's very, very good. And and Dr. Ioannidis is a real kind of gadfly in terms of good scientific. He says almost everything you read about nutrition is wrong.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's not. He's saying it's just not based on good science. Mm-hmm. That's all he's saying. Maybe it's not wrong, but it's there. You know, when people say do this, that, or the other thing, that's not based on good science.
Well, then we're left with a sort of a battleground between people who want to clamp down on other people's enjoyments.
Do you think part of that is kind of like? Do you think a lot of human beings, are kind of enjoy the exercise of power? Do you think that's kind of a natural thing that a lot of people like to do?
No doubt. I mean,
well, you'd say that
in many different walks of life, certainly.
I mean, don't we all in some way? I mean, I think. I don't know. I mean, I know I like to assert my power sometimes. I
think it makes people feel stronger if they're certain of an idea that they have. You know, that it gives them. It does. If they feel like they have a one up on you, I think a little bit.
Well, let me ask you. So since you've recommenced smoking, do you feel better health-wise now that we're talking about it? Not, but I mean, do you notice any kind of health change? I mean, are you?
Oh.
I don't want to hear anything negative.
No, I think that maybe. If I have a cold or something, I might notice a little more irritation in my throat, perhaps.
Yeah, right.
I might lay off a little bit just because of the cold.
Do you notice maybe improvement in digestion by any chance?
Not specifically. But I do. I think that I certainly haven't noticed any change in my wind or walking up or down stairs.
All these things.
I think when I started smoking again, I was a little bit worried that, oh my gosh, this is going to affect my lung capacity or something.
Right.
And that really hasn't been the case. And people who are negative about it will say, oh, you're going to develop emphysema or.
But you could develop. People get sick. People get sick and die whether they smoke or not.
Right.
This idea that if you don't smoke, you ain't going to get sick and die. Is bogus, right?
Well, I was talking to this fellow up in Portland. I've mentioned him to you. Who he used to be a 3-pack a day smoker, and he gave it up. But he's still quite tolerant of smoking. But he has devoted his life now to manufacturing receptacles for cigarette butts.
So you've been in touch with this?
Yeah,
fellow.
I talked to him. I had a very nice talk to him yesterday. And,
great.
He's worked with cities and towns around the country, and. It's just a very good public service that.
Well, why don't you describe a little bit, because we, in Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights has asked you to be the point man in this, because we have the idea that it would be a good thing for smokers and for non-smokers to place receptacles in strategic parts of Cambridge where smokers congregate to get rid of the litter problem. So now, why don't you take that and just tell me a little bit about
it's a win-win situation for everybody. Cigarette butts. What I've learned is that they eventually leach out into the coastal waters, and they can cause problems with. They're not biodegradable. There's an element of the cigarette filter, which is
the filter doesn't
plastic.
seem to be terribly biodegradable. That's right,
and that's a problem. And I know I've talked to people up in Salem who have been concerned about that. This fellow in Portland says that his receptacles have kept 1 million butts off the street in the last maybe 2 years.
Well, okay. Does he? Are they in Portland?
He works out of Portland, yes, and his company actually manufactures these. It's called the Sidewalk Butler, Buttler.
Really?
Yes, and he's a very friendly man. His name is Mike Roylos. He used to have a pub there in Portland, and he used to see so many cigarette butts outside of his establishment that he came up with a promotion that he would offer. He would offer people 5 cents for getting rid of their butt properly.
Right.
And eventually he became he couldn't handle that people were so interested in that he had to go one step further.
Now, have these receptacles? They're in Salem. Did he tell you how he got them in Salem, or what was the process?
Well, I know he's worked in Chelsea. He's worked in Salem. he works with city officials. There are different ways of going about it. Sometimes some communities will have actually a business sponsorship program where companies will actually purchase the receptacles themselves.
Yeah, right.
Other times, city governments will purchase them. Each one costs about $100.
Well, that's not too bad.
And there's an organization in New Jersey called TerraCycle, which disposes of the butts. They what people do is they empty the receptacles and they box them up. They box the cigarette butts up and they mail them to this organization in New Jersey, which handles them from that point on.
Right.
And sometimes they've used volunteers to empty the receptacles. Sometimes they use people who need some kind of work service program, or else volunteers, or perhaps the Department of Public Works might.
Or we could use prisoners.
Well,
with this,
exactly.
like chain gang. That would go over well in Cambridge, right? People who have been busted for marijuana possession.
Well,
there's one thing about this. It's not an entirely win-win situation, Dave.
How do you mean?
Because I believe that anti-smokers are very, very happy to see cigarette butts everywhere.
Really?
Oh, yes, definitely. Because they know that this is something that the public doesn't like, and so it creates animosity towards cigarette smokers. So I think anti-smoking groups, first of all, they don't want to see ashtrays because ashtrays are accommodating smokers and accommodating the habit.
Right.
And also, if you get rid of the cigarette butts on the street, they won't be able to say, "Oh, those dirty smokers." Listen, we've run out of time. You've been a great guest. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Hope to come again.